My name is Felix Windegger. Yeah, next slide, please, Lisa. And I am part of the Sustainable Tourism Observatory of South Tyrol, which is in Italy. And for those of you who don't know South Tyrol, it is a small autonomous province in the heart of the Italian Alps. We are a highly touristic region. We have about 500,000 inhabitants, but more than 7 million tourist arrivals per year. And that's why the tourism sector accounts for quite a big share of the total GDP. In 2017, it was 11%. We, as an observatory, have already produced 2 reports, but have so far not included public health as an issue area. And due to the huge impact, next slide, please, Lisa, that the COVID-19 pandemic had on Italy and also in South Tyrol and on the tourism sector in South Tyrol, we started to think about how we could potentially include health and public health as a topic in our report. And as you see in the graph at the top, if you look at the yellow curve, you can see that there was a first wave of COVID-19 infections between March and April. And now at the end of October, we are in the middle of a second wave. In terms of impacts on the tourism sector, if you look at the graph below, you can see that the first month had really a huge impact. The COVID-19, the virus had a huge impact. The overnight stays in the first 3 months, so between March and May, dropped by almost 90%. During this period, we had also the complete lockdown in Italy. However, South Tyrol was pretty good and pretty quick in the recovery process, so that in August, we almost reached the same levels of overnight stays as last year. Next slide, please. And between August and the beginning of October, we conducted 2 surveys on the impacts of COVID-19 on the tourism sector in South Tyrol, and one among guests and one among firms in the tourism sector, so hosts. And what I want to share with you are just a few answers to one of the questions, namely, did COVID-19 change the accommodation requirements of guests? And what we can see from the results is that yes, COVID-19 had an impact and guests seem to put more emphasis now on hygiene, but at the same time, they have a high level of trust, both in their hosts and the destination as such. And now, after these first approaches to the topic of health, we wanted to go deeper and really start from the beginning, so from the theoretical foundations. Next slide, please, Lisa. That's why we asked the question, well, how can we conceptualize public health in relation to sustainability and to sustainable tourism? And we started from a very basic definition. The Institute of Medicine defined public health as, I quote here, what we as a society do collectively to assure the conditions in which people can be healthy. So this means that public health is about the conditions in which people can be healthy. And if we think about that, then it immediately becomes clear that the environment and nature plays a significant role here. Because nature provides certain services that directly affect our health and our well-being. And these services are often referred to as ecosystem services. And you might think of clean air, for instance, or drinking water, food, raw materials that we use. And in general, the healthier an environment is, the higher is the quality of these ecosystem services. So we have this direct link between environmental health on the one side and public health on the other side. Now, if we take a step back and come back to sustainable tourism and to the question, well, how can we create a healthy and sustainable destination? Then we might have learned from these considerations that thinking environmental health and public health together might be helpful in this endeavor, and that we should try to foster both of them, and in particular look at the interconnections between them. Next slide, please, Lisa. And the next question was then, well, how can we monitor public and environmental health? And in doing so, one can differentiate between different structures or levels, or dimensions. Namely, the first dimension is infrastructures, the second level of services, and the third one, the level of personal experiences. And yeah, when looking for suitable indicators, we can look into these different dimensions. And for instance, on the level of infrastructures, we have on the one hand, health and hygiene infrastructure, and on the other hand, the state of the natural environment. At the level of services, we can compare public health services with ecosystem services. And finally, on the level of experiences, we can compare perceived well-being of a person and the experienced recovery processes with aesthetic and recreational experiences in the natural environment. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that many of these aspects are extremely important when it comes to the resilience of destinations. And because like a destination or a region with a high quality health and hygiene infrastructure and good public health service has a higher capacity to deal with external shocks like the COVID pandemic. And what is crucial here is the concept of readiness that Lisa already mentioned. So how well prepared or how ready is the destination to deal with unforeseen events? Or if we come back to the question of the questionnaire I briefly presented to you before, we could ask, how well is the public health system prepared to deal with changing expectations and demands from the side of the guests in COVID-19 times? Next slide, please, Lisa. And now I will come to my final slide and try to wrap things up. Well, the first thing that we have learned is that thinking public and environmental health together might be helpful to create healthier, more sustainable, and more resilient destinations. The second important lesson that we learned is that readiness is a critical concept in this context. And it is critical because it's decisive for the ability to react to unforeseen events. And so we also should pay attention to this aspect. And finally, what we as an observatory now need to do is to identify suitable indicators in order to be able to monitor public and environmental health. And we want to do that on these three levels or in these dimensions that I mentioned before. So infrastructures, services, and experiences. And last but not least, how are we going to do that? Well, we were going to first look at the kind of data that is already available and then try to complement the existing data with our own service. Well, that's it for now from our side. These are our contacts. Anna Scuttari, we prepared this presentation together. She was also very involved in the process in the last weeks. Yeah, if you want to get in touch. And otherwise, thank you for your attention. Thank you, Lisa, for the collaboration, and back to you, Dirk.